Hi, I'm Lauren Graham and I'd like to introduce you to some of the travels I've embarked on with parents who've lost the care of their children through statutory intervention. I'd like to introduce you to a group navigating relationships with our children when our children are in out-of-home care. And it's a group which invites parents to step into new territories of identity through a journey metaphor and documents the subjugated skills and knowledges of navigating the effects of statutory intervention on their lives. The sharing of these documents and parents' journeys with other communities facing similar circumstances, as well as with practitioners committed to family inclusive practices, forms my practice innovation, which is called Linking the Stories of Parents who've lost the care of their children. Of course, the group and the practice innovation are inextricably linked. Let me just introduce you to the landscape of which ideas for setting sail on a seafaring journey and the sharing of stories have sprung from. I work in a non-government child and family service sector in Newcastle. Newcastle's part of the Hunter region, which is part of New South Wales, just north of Sydney in Australia. I'd not often met with parents who've lost the care of their children. That's because there's no specific funded services for parents facing these circumstances, except for supervised contact. Some years ago, I did some supervised contact work, and at that time I noticed that my experience of birth parents did not match up with the demonised view that fitted with the dominant discourses such as unfit mother, bad parents, or drug addicts. I noticed how I'd been influenced by the single story accounts of parents who have not been able to provide sufficient safety for their children. I also saw the effects of scrutiny intensified on account of statutory intervention on their sense of themselves as being active influences in their children's lives, and that children's ways of expressing discontent or discomfort were experienced as a direct reflection of their failings as a parent, and as Foucault would describe, the operations of modern power. So it's not by happenstance that families who are more likely affected by statutory intervention live in poverty, are overrepresented by Aboriginal families living with the effects of the stolen generation and cultural intolerance, are women who have been abused in intimate relationships, and are adults who were abused or neglected as children themselves or have grown up in care as a result. They live with significant disabilities or have struggled with drug addiction or mental health difficulties and are socially isolated in the communities in which they live. As I got more in touch with the experiences of parents, I reflected that I too could have put my child at risk if I'd had experienced just a small portion of what families in these circumstances are up against. The Hunter region has disproportionately higher and rising rates of substantial cases of abuse and neglect, and children living in care as compared to the rest of the state. This can also be said about the rates of Aboriginal children in care. Mary Ivek, one of our Australian researchers on international models of family engagement when families are affected by statutory intervention, reports that the child protection system often causes great damage to those it sought to protect. In 2014, I joined a group of practitioners and educators working in the child and family sector, interested in addressing the rising numbers of child removal and being placed into long-term care in the Hunter region. We are now incorporated as family inclusive strategies in the Hunter, and fondly known as FISH, and we're represented by practitioners, parents, family members and carers who are committed to promoting family inclusion in the lives of children in child protection and out-of-home care, and family inclusive practice in the child protection and out-of-home care systems. FISH's mission and initiatives are aligned with the imperatives of consumer-led initiatives implemented successfully in other sectors such as mental health and disabilities. And you can find out more about FISH on our website or on our Facebook page. It is the nexus between FISH's mission for local social action and in response to the increased rate of child removal, the unsustainable growth in the foster care system, and an unmet and increasing demand from the Children's Court for parents to attend parenting programs that inspired this practice innovation. So the intention for the group work program was to deconstruct the problems often affecting the lives of parents facing these circumstances and rendering visible the ways in which parents resist the effects of problems and respond in preferred ways. And in addition to the themes of problems, later themes pointed to preferred directions such as treasured connections with children, sustaining hopes and links with others. Along with this intention was to document the subjugated skills and knowledges of navigating this particular journey, to share with others facing similar circumstances, as well as with practitioners committed to the development of family-inclusive practice. Through practices of outsider witnessing, it is hoped that the stories and documents from the group could contribute to the lives of other parents and families affected by statutory intervention, as well as have ripple effects for local action in family inclusion and child welfare reforms, and in turn a richer description of the identity of parents who have so generously shared their lives in this process. Before I go any further, I just want to also acknowledge the help and assistance I gained from my supervisor, Amanda Watts, Nathan Deering, who's also a student of this degree, and a psychology student, Shay O'Reilly. Both Nathan and Shay were incredibly supportive in helping me run the group. So the following is a description of the group and some excerpts that describe some of the specifics of the narrative inquiries and parents' responses. And in particular, I'll be sharing the metaphor inspired by narrative inquiries, which often created space for the performance of preferred identity. So it was in the early stages of meeting with parents as a group that I heard the expression, "We're all in the same boat." And this realisation offered some comfort in the discovery that they weren't the only parent facing these circumstances. This image inspired what became a nautical, seafaring themed journey metaphor and provides rich imagery and language for double-story development and migration of identity for the group program. 7 key themes were identified. The first 4 representing the problems and relationships that people have with problems, as described by Epstein. The tempest of anger, the island of scrutiny, offloading the cargo of shame and guilt, and crossing the straits of grief and loss. The sequence of these 4 topics was democratically chosen by group members each week. And the final themes of the program, which focus on preferred directions, practices and relationships, are keeping bearings on our children and treasured memories and connections, lighthouses of hope and messages of hope for others, and who's on my crew. The format of most sessions had 5 key inquiries: a beginning reflection, externalising the problem, inviting, as Denenborough describes, a collective voice, considering a personal or introspective accounts of effects and resistance, and then further double-story development and a final reflection. This format drew on the work of Cora and Linnell, who developed a group program for women who were sexually abused as children. So the kinds of inquiry through the group also generated 3 collective type documents: tips for navigating scrutiny, ways to sustain treasured memories and connections with our children, and messages of hope for others who might pass this way. And a collective document about ways parents sustain themselves is also being created. I'll now share some excerpts of practice and responses from the group. And names of people, where relevant, have been changed. So the tempest of anger. For a beginning reflection and drawing on practices of externalising, we used images of storms to evoke the particular kinds or experience near descriptions of anger problems parents have experienced. This reflection invited a characterising and naming of the anger problem and the beginnings of naming the effects. So we were introduced to The washing machine anger. It's on spin cycle, it's turbulent, you don't know if you're going to come out of it, and I don't want to get sucked into that hole. The deep anger. It's dark and lonely. There doesn't seem to be any hope on the horizon. The unpredictable anger. It's explosive and dangerous. The use of imagery provided a playful step into a collective deconstruction of anger as a problem that had serious implication for their lives and their children. Offloading the cargo of shame and guilt. For double-story development, we took up inquiries of the absent but implicit, and drawing on the imagery of cargo, utilised the opportunity for somatic performance, feeling the weight of shame and guilt, and actively moving away from its totalising effects by connecting with other intentions that can be uncovered. Parents were invited to choose a box or boxes as symbolic cargo representative of the shame or guilt they carried, and to name them. Some cargo was named as ashamed that why they were taken was true, I was abusive towards them, not to trust myself. These were placed one by one in the middle of the room on a large fishnet. Then parents were asked to take back any cargo that might be representative of where they might have crossed one of their own boundaries or principles for doing life. This inquiry was intended to help distinguish between the shame and guilt they felt and the shame and guilt that's loaded up on them through statutory intervention, and develop an entry point into double-story development. In creating a space between the shame and guilt loaded up on parents and the shame and guilt that spoke to something important to them, we invited parents to take up the sides of the fishnet with the remaining cargo and offload it by walking it out of the room. One parent reflected, I feel it in my body. It's like the burden has been taken off my shoulders. I'm not doing self-doubt anymore. Crossing the straits of grief and loss. An introspective reflection in pairs drew on an absent but implicit and reauthoring inquiries in the development of preferred meanings and identity in relation to the kinds of loss and grief parents experience. The responses have been shaped by the following inquiries. Think about one of your own experiences with loss and grief and pick one that has left you feeling washed up, sinking with despair, or pounded by waves on this journey. What was happening? How were you or others responding? And what else were you noticing? And when you reflect upon this particular experience of loss and grief, what do you notice was most important to you? If grief could speak, what would it be saying about what was precious or overlooked, minimised or discounted? What was grief wanting to hold on to? A woman known as Auntie Jane had the kinship care of her two nephews and niece before she lost the care of them. The youngest nephew, Jimmy, was 7 years old and had been in her care since he was 5 months. Their relationship was experienced as mother and son. She responded, going to school activities, that's a huge loss. I used to go to school assemblies every Monday morning. I watched the kids interact with their friends and see them participating in school activities. Jimmy would get up on the stage and perform amongst his friends. I got to see him being his own person and making decisions. A lot of my friends and people in the community now tell me what he's doing at school. I'm missing seeing them going up on stage, looking for me in the crowd and waving. Jimmy would say, "Hello, Mama, look at me." He's a cheeky little thing. I lost a part of me when the kids were removed. I did a lot at the school as being part of the school community. I get called Auntie Jane by everyone. Even the teachers call me Auntie Jane. The day of the cross country, I had 4 kids come past my home saying, "Jimmy came first. Should have seen him run." They were all proud of him too. I had a lot of respect, and I still do, because they say, "When are you coming back, Auntie Jane? We can't wait till you come back." We know you're going to. The kids, teachers and parents prop me up, as well as the people in the community. In relation to what grief is holding on to, Auntie Jane said, "It's the importance of belonging somewhere. I've been in this community for nearly 17 years. I became more involved in the community through the school and meeting other mums, and I've also have a stall at the local markets. People say, 'How you going, Auntie Jane? What are you up to?' It brings a smile to my face when I hear people call me Auntie Jane, like the kids in the street. I can't be a bad, scary person if I'm liked by a lot of kids. Kids are very, very in tune." So after some further inquiries for rich descriptions of preferred meanings and relational identity to grief and loss, parents were invited to symbolise what they come to hold precious as treasures caught in a fishnet. Auntie Jane shared, "I drew the 3 kids and me. The Smith family forever. No matter what, we're still family." I included some words: memories, loved family, sense of belonging, fun, laughter, happiness and children. Keeping the bearings on our children. The purpose of this theme was to make visible the ways in which parents stay in touch with their preferred identity as parents and their sense of connection with their children, in spite of the effects of statutory intervention. So for beginning reflection and drawing on re-authoring inquiries, we invited parents to share in pairs a step or action that kept their bearings on their children when they otherwise might have gone off course. The following is a response from a proud Aboriginal Worimi woman who grew up in foster care. She was being tyrannised by an ex-partner and suffering depression at the time her and her current partner's child was removed. "I can end up feeling really depressed with dealings with docs. I had missed starting our daughter at school and seeing her dressed in her school uniform. So we have started what we call our time trials. We make out our daughter is still at home. We get up, cut her lunch and walk to school and eat the sandwich on the way back. Education is everything. This is what the time trials is connected to. I didn't have an education and I really want that for her. I want her to have a proper job and go through life properly. It's about routine, education, and making sure everything is on time. We both do it every morning. It keeps us strong." Supervised contact is keenly observed, and if proceeding to a permanent placement in care, contact is often decreased to break the bond between the child and parent. These experiences significantly diminish parents' sense of influence in their child's life and their practices for caring. Influenced by White's idea that no one is a passive recipient to trauma and abuse, that people are always responding, I speculated that parents might also respond in a myriad of ways to stay connected to their children and stay in touch with the performance of being a parent in their children's lives, in spite of the eventuality of court proceedings and the experience of separation. This idea shaped the inquiry. In what ways do parents stay connected with their children, their sense of relationship with their children, their sense of being with their children, in spite of children not being in their care or having no contact? This question invited a collective voice, where the parents spoke both on behalf of parents and of their own particular initiatives. The responses to this inquiry primarily form the document, Ways to Sustain Treasured Memories and Connections with Our Children. Messages of Hope. This session started with a guided imagery meditation designed to invite parents to reflect on their personal and group journey and the journey ahead. Parents were consulted through re-authoring inquiries about what they were becoming more knowing, about what's possible that they had wished they had known when they started out, and what they had wished for other parents just setting out on this journey to know. Parents were invited to consider the kinds of messages or particular sentiments that join with hope and possibility. The responses to these inquiries became the document Messages of Hope for Others Who Might Pass This Way. Invitation for resonance about what they heard and what they would wish to remember that could be sustaining of them through tough times informed a personalised message of hope to themselves, which was then concealed in a cork bottle to take home. A theme that threads through parents' experience is the impact of scrutiny on their lives. I noticed how parents had hard-won knowledges of navigating the child protection and legal systems and generously shared these with others to minimise the possibility of further negative judgment. It became clear the importance of documenting the very practical tips, the practices of or ways of being in the systems. This document became known as Tips for Navigating Scrutiny, and I'm reminded of Epson's statement, "Such knowledges are fiercely and unashamedly pragmatic." I've always been drawn to narrative community practices and what has developed as collective narrative practice, such as the work of Deddenborough and White and Wingard. It seemed fitting in considering the isolating effects of shame on parents and families and the possibilities held in their stories for how we might respond to child protection concerns in the future, that I find ways to link these stories and initiatives with other communities. The first family inclusion network in Australia, located in Townsville, which is specifically designed to support parents and families facing these circumstances, was an obvious community to approach and inquire as to whether the work of the group sparked their curiosity. I was welcomed as a guest at their weekly meeting and was greeted by many volunteers and several parents. I shared excerpts of the group responses to the themes and also posters of the 3 documents now hang on the wall of their meeting space. Volunteers and parents found significant resonance in the excerpts and responded to these. I will share a response from a woman who'd lost her daughter to child safety 6 years ago. That's how I feel. Reading the words describing people's feelings in the tempest of anger and offloading the cargo of shame and guilt has really taken my interest. These are the feelings I feel. This is going to be really helpful for me when I see my counsellor. It helps to put words to what I've been feeling. I have feelings of isolation and shame. When you lose your child, you're judged to be someone you're not. The shame has affected all my family members and family relationships. My parents can't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. When I read it, I went, wow, this is what other parents are feeling. It's a normal feeling that you have when you've lost a child through child safety. They're not made up feelings. That's how I feel. I can work on these feelings. I feel like I got some direction. I was in a rut. I was stuck. I can have direction now. It's been hard for me to put into words. I have so much pain. It makes a difference to know other people are going through the same feelings, same emotions, same pain, different circumstances and stories, but the same pain. So considering some of the ethics, there's substantial complexity in considering the power relations and subsequent ethics that relate to this practice innovation. The overarching ethic is considering the safety and well-being of children whose lives have been affected by the actions or lack of action by their significant caregiver. Although the parents whose practices of parenting constitute abuse are also likely to have experienced significant social inequalities, this does not take away from or minimise the effects of their actions on their children. However, along with the effects of living in unsafe homes, children are also often experience removal and placement into care as a traumatic and unexpected upheaval in their lives, and is not a process that is entered into lightly. In considering the child protection intervention and doing the least harm, when should the state be involved, and when does the effects of state involvement further diminishes parents' capacity to address the necessary concerns. What are the impacts of allocating resources only to families with children still in their care or when children are being restored? What are the effects for parents grappling with grief and loss after child removal and the consequences for their relationship with their children? The guiding mantra, what is in the best interest of the child, often inadvertently supports a binary position in practice. The safety of the child to the exclusion of the parent and family. Is this to the detriment of children or for the benefit of children? The rights of children and the importance of family relationships across different courts are viewed somewhat differently. In the family court, decisions are primarily made on the principle that children have the right to have access to both parents. Yet in the children's court, when considering the state as a parent, this kind of principle is not applied with the same importance or to the same degree. This project is positioned with the idea of, and in the words of Mary Ivek, restoring safety to children, restoring parental morale, and restoring authority and power to parents and families are not seen as incompatible goals. In the initial pre-group interview with parents and in the first session of the program, a clear statement of position regarding the priority for children's safety and well-being was made, and the vital role of child protection in ensuring children's safety. We also acknowledge the efforts parents make for change to have their children restored to their care, but this was not always a guaranteed outcome, and it was not the purpose of the group. We were clear the group was about salvaging their preferred identities as parents that wasn't contingent on children being restored to their care, and sustaining a sense of connection with their children in spite of the circumstances. So as a way of keeping myself accountable to the experiences of children, I have invited adults who experienced abuse as children and either remained in the care of their parent or were placed into care as consultants for the practice innovation. And this is in keeping with the practices of accountability demonstrated by, for example, the work of Dedenbauer and Freeman in working with men who use violence and abuse. So with this kind of feedback with the consultants, it's been helping to shape further inquiries with parents as I consult with them in this practice innovation. And for example, I'm beginning to think about eliciting responses from witnesses and ask, what might this suggest about what parents' appreciation for the children's experiences and what's important for the care of children? What do you imagine parents are valuing about children's experiences in these expressions? And when eliciting a response from parents in hearing their witness responses to their stories, and as a part of the transport inquiry, I could ask, in reflecting on the ways in which others have been responding to your contributions, where might this be taking you in considering your skills and knowledge of children's experiences and their sense of themselves on this journey that you might not have got in touch with before? So in the sharing of my practice innovation with you today, you now have the opportunity to join in on this journey as an outsider witness, but also as a practitioner who might be connected to these particular themes through your work and find resonance in the stories of parents you've heard today. Or if you are consulting with parents or family members who might connect with these documents, please email me on the address below so that I can pass them on to you. Thank you for listening today. I really appreciate your time and look forward to hearing from you.